The greatest leaders have defined a clear purpose for themselves and live it every day. They create a better world by caring for others and are committed to touching as many lives as possible along the way. To me, a true leader changes lives and inspires others to achieve their goals. I'm grateful to have had such leaders in my own life. During the writing of my book, it became clear that many of the traits that I admired are common threads of leadership. Leaders generously bestow the vision to everyone they touch. They truly believe that you always get back more than you give. It's true that leaders are not born, rather they earn this respected title by hard work and dedication. A leader who sees the world from the vantage point of others knows that when you're improving the lives of others, they have found their true calling. And to me, that's what leadership is. Someone who takes pleasure in seeing the best qualities in another unleashed.
Over the last 12 years, I have had the distinct privilege of traveling to 47 states, visiting 16 countries, sharing my message, and meeting incredible people along the way. And the thing about tonight is that even though I've been able to travel around the entire globe sharing my message that I just love, that I'm so passionate about, tonight is a full circle moment for me because it is a living example of what I'm so passionate about, which is the facets of leadership. But what is leadership? If you Google it, you'll get over 1 million responses. If you look on Amazon, you'll have 100,000 books that come up. That's a lot of information about just one topic. But what's right and what's wrong? I don't believe that there is a right and wrong answer when it comes to that question because I think that it's something deeper than that. I think that it's about chiseling down to the core characteristics that set us apart from other people as individuals. I think that it's about making impacts, which we see right here today, which is a living example of it, which I just love. I was recently on a plane ride to Washington, D.C., because I was invited there to speak at a bank and government summit meeting. When I was on the way to Washington, D.C., I was sitting next to a gentleman. And of course, when I tell people what I do for a living, they sometimes like to challenge me on it. And I remember he started asking me all these questions. And one of the questions that he asked me, I had an answer for. But then he started scribbling some stuff on a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, he wrote down the Roman numeral 9. And he asked me, he said, let me ask you something. How can you turn this into 6 with one solid line? Finally, I just said, you know what? I don't know. What's the answer? And he says, the answer is the #1 lesson in success. And that is learning to think outside the box. Because a solid line doesn't necessarily have to be a straight line. Wow, that made such an impact on me. And that's what leadership is about, the impacts that we have on one another and the impacts that we can make on one another as we cross their paths in life. Impacts are something that we're seeing here today that are just coming alive, that last a lifetime. Our first experiences with leadership is through our teachers. You can think back with an example of this by thinking about your best teacher and your worst teacher. Now, some of you, it's not a challenge to think of your best teacher because you invited them here tonight. But also think about your worst teacher. I can remember mine because mine was both in the 3rd grade. I started the 3rd grade and I was so excited about it. I remember the first day of school, I actually got paired up with my best friend and I was just thinking, this is gonna be the best year ever. But then, if I would have believed in conspiracy theories, which I don't, but had I would have thought that teacher took one look at me and said, I'm gonna make Brian Townley's life miserable. Because I learned more about rejection, dejection, and what goes on in the hallway than I learned about anything else. I began to fail the 3rd grade. And so my parents knew that something was wrong. So they went to the school and suggested that perhaps I be transferred into another class. And that's when I met Miss Gilchrist. She taught me that I was the smartest, most confident 7-year-old there was. And my grades began to change. I began to love school again. My whole philosophy changed. It was the same curriculum, but two totally different influences I had teaching me, because impacts are what guide us through life. We have to think of impacts too as just like the title of my latest book that I wrote, Ripple Effect. When we throw that rock into the water, that rock's only there for a moment. Just like we're only here for a moment. But the impacts can go on and on and on. And those impacts can be positive, can be negative, but one thing's for certain is they're never neutral. But what's important with the ripple effect that it makes and the impacts they make is the core of the ripple. What creates that ripple? And that's the core characteristics that set us apart from other people. And to me, I call it the seeds of regeneration. When you have a seed, there's an element inside it. There's an ingredient inside that seed that tells that seed if it's going to be a weed, a flower, or a tree. It's the same way with us. Our core characteristics and the elements that build that core define if our ripples are going to be positive or they're going to be negative. And so we've got to learn to examine our core and understand the ingredients that's in that makes us who we are. It starts with learning to lead ourselves. I remember fast forwarding my Midway career to being in high school. I had made the decision when I was 17 years old and a junior in high school that I was done with sports. I came home and I told my parents, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. And they said, well, that's your decision. And you need to be okay with your decision. However, if you're not going to practice your physical skills anymore and enhance them, then you're going to enhance your academic skills. So you will get a job. I said, that sounds easy. I'll do it. So every day I would come home and the question was, did you go apply for a job today? And the answer was, no. I had not. Well, I played that card as long as I could. And finally I knew that I was going to need a different answer, right? So that's when I made an appointment to go see Miss Ragsdale. She didn't know me from Adam. She sat down and talked to me, and we were going through all these questions, and she said, you know what? I know the perfect job for you. I'm going to make some phone calls, and I'm going to see if I can't get you an interview at the bank. And I was like, wow, a bank. Okay, that sounds good. And so she called me back to her office, and she said, I made an appointment, 3:30 after school. Go over there. They want to meet with you. So I went. And guess what? I got to go home with a different answer. This time, whenever they said, did you apply for a job? I said, yep, I sure did. However, the phone rang, and it was the bank. And they said, we just wanted to let you know that we want to hire you. Well, I wasn't looking for a job. I was just looking for an answer, right? I was just looking for a yes. However, I knew I had to say, okay, I'll be there. And so I did show up. And you know what? She was right. I showed up and I loved it. I wanted to know everything there was about the bank. When I took that deposit, I wanted to know what happened to that check. When I wanted to know how that money was loaned out. I wanted to know how the bank made money. I wanted to know everything about it. And I had a good supervisor who started taking me under her wing and teaching me all the elements of banking. And she taught me everything there was over the next 4 years. And so I started learning everything about the bank. And then I don't know what her plans for me were, because our time got cut short, because our bank, which was People's Bank right on Hewitt Drive, was failed to the FDIC. And the new bank that was coming in that was going to buy us came in to observe us before they bought us. The next Monday I came to work, all the supervisors had been fired. No supervisors were there. And so they came to me and they says, as we were observing, every time there was something that needed to be done, everyone would say, Brian knows where it is, or Brian knows how to do it. And so we want you to manage the branch. And so I said, okay. And so there I was, 21 years old, being faced with managing people that were 10 years older than me, been there 10 years longer than me, and I had no idea how to manage them. but I knew how the bank worked. We all have epiphany moments in our life. And I remember the first epiphany moment that I had was when the bank president called me and he said, Brian, we need to have lunch. And I thought, yes, this is great. And I remember him going to lunch with me, and he said, Brian, I don't really know how to say this, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The ladies at the office just think that you're an ass. And at first I was angry about it after I got over being shocked, because I didn't think that I was. I was just trying to get people that didn't want to do what I said we needed to do it, right? But my first instinct as a 21-year-old was, well, if they think that's what one is, I'll go back tomorrow and show them what one really is, and then they'll know that they were wrong. However, that was the wrong thought, right? Thank goodness I thought a little bit harder on it, and I learned. The epiphany moment that I learned that has lasted me a lifetime, that I've told a million times if I've told it once, is until you're willing to see the perception of others, you'll never have the ability to change. Wow. That's so true. There's a power in perception. Sometimes there are things that we do that we don't even know that we do, but everyone around us knows. So listen for those clues, because it allows you to be able to lead others. And leading others is a broad term. You've got to understand that whenever you lead others, it includes direct reports, people that report directly to you, people that you work with, your peers, people that have authority over you. Just because someone is your boss, you still want them to look at you as a leader. You still want your peers to look at you as a leader. And of course you want your direct reports to look at you as a leader. But also the people that observe you, people in the community, customers that you may have as you go into the workforce. And one thing that all these groups have in common is that every single one of them you will find is at one time in your life going to be difficult. So the lesson is whenever leading others, is how you deal with difficult people. I learned this whenever I was the HR director. Backing up to the bank, I went back and I wanted to be the best leader I could be. I wanted to be the best boss I could be. I wanted to be the most helpful. And over the years, I began getting promoted about every 2 years. I ended up retiring from there 2 years ago after 26 years as senior vice president. I started as a teller making $3.10 an hour and retired there as senior vice president. So I have to give Monty Monroe credit that she knew what she was talking about when she said, I've got the perfect job for you. But whenever we're learning to deal with difficult people, and I was the director of HR during some of those career moves, one of the things that I found interesting was whenever I'd have employees, grown adults, coming to me saying, oh, I can't get along with so-and-so, or so-and-so won't talk to me, and I would try to get down to the core of what the problem was. And it would be that someone had offended them. Well, I would say, why are you offended? And they said, and we would get into that discussion. And we always went back to a lesson that my grandmother taught me. When I was about 5 years old, I was at a park, and I don't even know what happened, but somebody hurt my feelings. And I ran home, and I was crying, and my grandmother said, what's wrong? And I'm sure I had some long story. And I never will forget, she said, why did you take offense? And I said, I promise I didn't take it. Because I didn't know what she's talking about. I thought I was being blamed for taking something. I said, what's an offense? And she said, offense is something that you chose to take. She said, let me explain it to you like this. If you had a baseball and someone threw it at you, you have a choice to either catch it or to let it roll by. And that's what an offense is. An offense is you had the choice to take it. And what happens normally whenever you catch a ball? When you catch a ball, the normal instinct is to throw it back. And there you go. You've got a tennis match going back and forth. And that's where the old saying, when you get in the mud with the pig gets happy and you get dirty. Well, that's where it goes whenever you start reacting to an offense in an inappropriate way. The other lesson in dealing with difficult people is you will always have customers or somebody in life that just are upset. And When they're upset, what you have to think of is imagine to yourself when someone comes to you upset is them climbing a mountain. They're going to climb while they talk, and they may be just telling you all kinds of things you don't want to hear, but you have to let them get to the top. Once they get to the top, they're going to let you know because they're going to sigh, they're going to be quiet, they're going to allow you to know, listen, I am done, and now I want a response. Now it's our job as leaders to take them down to the other side. Because if you don't, and you just let them start climbing a little way and you interrupt, all you did is knock them back down to the bottom of the mountain. And then they just keep going back down, and they never get it out. Because 9 times out of 10, that's all they need. They just want to be heard. So when you're dealing with difficult people, you have to understand that we can't change how people treat us, but we can change how we react to how people treat us. Because it's a behavior. Most of the time, they're acting out of fear. Because fear is the third part of the core. Fear is something that creates natural behavior and adapted behavior. Natural behavior is what we do without even thinking. We just do it naturally. It might not be the best for the situation or the circumstance, but it's just how we know to react without thinking. Adapted behavior is what's best for the circumstance, where we have to stop and think before we react. But behavior is, to understand ourselves and others, we have to understand fear and what drives behavior. There are 4 major fears out in the workplace and just in general, in life. Some of these we're a blend of all, but there are 4 that are most prominent to us, to certain individuals. And when I go through all 4 of these, one of these is going to resonate with you more than the other. The first is the loss of control. There are people in the workplace who love control. And once you take away control from them, they feel uncomfortable. It's like the old saying, a tugboat toots its horn the loudest when it's in a fog. Well, that's people that have a fear of loss of control. The other is loss of relationship. These are people that fear that if I talk to someone about something that's delicate, they may get upset with me. That's a fear that drives a certain behavior. The other is change. There's some people that like everything just the way it is, and let's not change anything. They love their comfort zone. But we all know that if we're okay with our comfort zone, we're not going to really see a lot of things change because the rewards are in the risk zone. The other is to be wrong. I remember whenever I took over the HR department at the bank, I had a lady there that ran our personnel department, and she had done it longer than I'd been alive, right? And she had done a really good job. However, our policies and procedures were outdated, and so I needed her to update them. But I wanted to be kind to her and say, listen, I know you're busy, and when you get time, we need to do this. And I never got them. And I realized it was her fear to be wrong, because I was not giving her a due date. Therefore, it would never be good enough to turn in. Those are your perfectionists. So these fears drive certain behaviors sometimes. They drive natural behavior, how we just automatically react, when sometimes we have to dig down deep for our adapted behavior. Like I will tell you right now, to be wrong is not